Hello, today we're going to talk about finding the rate of change and initial value of a function in a graph. Alright, the function we are talking about is a slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b. In this form, you have two distinct things. You have the slope and you have the y-intercept. We're going to talk about the slope first. So the slope is also known as the rate of change. All right? This is how fast you change from your y-intercept or your initial value. How fast it goes up. If you're talking about a word problem, you'll see something like, I pay $25 per hour. So the slope in that case would be 25, because it's changing $25 for every hour. That is how fast it's changing. Now if I said $10 per hour, it'd be changing at a rate of $10 per hour. You find this in a couple ways, but you have the slope formula, which is m equals a change in y over the change in x, or slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, those negatives there, they're not really negatives, they're just saying change the sign. So whatever you put in your y1 and x1, you're just going to change the sign. If you have a 2, you're going to put it in as -2. If you have a -3, you're going to put it in as 3. If you think of that way, it makes it a lot easier. When you're graphing, I'll keep the same color, you do rise over run, which means basically how far you go north and south, east and west. All right? There's a nice way to do it with similar triangles. That helps out a lot. We'll get into that in a little bit. All right, so your y-intercept is your initial value. It's what you start at. So say I gave you the example from before. I say $25, I pay $25 per hour, and there is an insurance that I buy for $25. All right, so I'm renting, let's say $10. I'm renting a bicycle. All right, I have to pay $10 of insurance just to get the bike. If I don't ride it at all, I pay $10. That's how much I initially have to pay no matter what. $10, that's your y-intercept, that's what you start at. And then it changes by ever how much you're paying after that. This is always written as 0, then whatever the number is. So 0, 5, 0, -7, all right, and so on and so forth. And those are the two big things that you need to know from the slope-intercept form. The rate of change is the slope, the initial value is the y-intercept. All right, now we're going to go over two examples on how to find your rate of change or your slope and your initial value, which is your y-intercept. So as I said before, your initial value or your y-intercept will always be written as 0 some number. So if you can find in a chart where it says 0 for your x, that number that it goes with will be your y-intercept. So this is actually written 0, 350, which is what our initial value is written as. So our initial value here is 350. It's where we start at since 2009. You've read 350 books, all right? Your slope, or the rate of change that you increase year by year, because it's got to be constant. I'm going to choose these first two. So you choose 2 points because we don't have a graph here. So 0, 350 and 1, 550. I call this 1, I call this 2, x, y, x, y. Then I give it the little subscript of what I numbered it. So my formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I do 550 minus 350 over 1 minus 0. So equals 200 over 1, simplify down to 200. So if this was written as a word problem, you could say, as of 2009, I've read 350 books. The next year after a year, I read 550 books. I'm up to 550. After another year, I'm up to 750 books. How many books do I read per year? That would be your slope or your rate of change. And you started at 350. All right, now let's come over here. Your initial value, where'd you start at? All right, well, I started in this whole thing at 0 hours and 2 people. Now I need to know my slope or how much I'm changing. So let's say I'm gonna take the first points just because it's the easiest. Call this 1, call this 2, x, y, 1, 1, 2, 2. 43 minus 2 over 1 minus 0 equals 41. So it's changing by 41 people every hour. You could say this is your party. At the very beginning of your party, you had 2 people. After an hour, you had 43 people. After 2 hours, you had 84 people. And then you can predict how many you're gonna have after 4 hours, is how this works. So you started with 2, that's your initial value or your y-intercept. And then your slope or your rate of change, you gain 41 people per hour. All right, now we're gonna find this one from a graph. All right, so we have our graph here. We have a linear function, even though it's not super straight. Our initial value. So our initial value is where this line crosses our coordinate plane or our graph on the y-axis. This is the y. So where does it cross? Well, it crosses right there at 100. So that point right there is actually 0, 100. But your initial value where you start at is from at 100. An example of what this would be is if you were like at an arcade or something, you're spending money, or you go to the grocery store and you're spending money. Right? Not so much the grocery store, it'd be more constantly spending money. You go to the fair and you constantly spend money. So the slope here, we're gonna do it differently. I'm gonna erase this. We're gonna do rise over run this time. Since I already have 2 known points, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to run this line all the way over till I meet where this point is. All right? And then I'm gonna go all the way down to meet it. What I've done now is made a right triangle. Right? By making that right triangle, now I can tell what my rise over my run and my slope is. So how many did I go up? So I rose from 0 up to 100. Right? How many did I run over? So remember, run is east-west. So I ran from here over to here. I ran over 10 to 0. And that simplifies down to just 10. But now this line is a negative line. You have 2 different ones. You have this one and this one. This is negative and this is positive. Like I said, you're losing money in this case. So your actual answer is negative 10. You have to know the difference between a negative and a positive line, or you can just use your number sense and your common sense to figure out, all right, I'm decreasing as I'm going forward, so it has to be negative. Now we're gonna come over to this one. I didn't write down, but the initial value is where the y-intercept is, or where this line crosses the y-axis. It crosses it at 0, 4. So our initial value is 4. Our slope, though, we're gonna make the triangle again. I'm gonna run till I meet it, right there. And then I'm gonna run down there, making a right triangle. So basically you're just going, doesn't matter if you start at this point, I'm going down until I get level with this, and then I go over to meet it. So how many did I go from here up to here? Well, it's at 19, and then it goes down to 4. So 15. Then I went from here to 0. I went over 5. So 15 over 5, because it's rise over run. change, you get 3. So you're changing 3 every however many units that is. And there you go. That is how you determine your rate of change in initial value from a graph. All right, this has been finding the rate of change in initial value of a function in a graph, I guess, and table. Hope it helps. Good luck.